start manipulating some of the data. But just know dimensions are blue and measures are green. And you can see that this is what it looks like in the Tableau work area. You'll see the dimensions are listed up here and they're blue. And then the icons down here are green, and these are the measures. And so I just want you to be able to understand that. And so understanding how how Tableau looks at the data is important, because Tableau will try to help you or force you to use certain visualizations based on the data that you load. So Tableau tries to predict what you want or need. So knowing how it kind of sees items and data will help you load the things the way you want it to be in the visualization. If Tableau sees two categorical variables, it will not understand how to build a visualization that is based on an X and Y axis, like a scatter plot. It doesn't know how to chart the points over the two categorical axes. So if you had just dimensions, it thinks of a scatter plot as numbers on the X and Y axis. It is good to know this, as it impacts what you can pick or to chart, but you can also manipulate this as well. For example, if you can't find your variable, look to see if it's in the wrong list. So sometimes if you have something up here, you may need to put it down here, and we'll kind of look at some of that as well. And then you may just need to move it around and recode the variables, and we'll definitely recode some variables today. Okay, so as we get in here, excuse me, I have a bit of a cough, I apologize. We're just going to look at some data before we get into Tableau itself, so we can see what it looks like. So let's look at this sample of data before getting into Tableau. This is an orders list from a company. You can see we have a date and the amount of product, and then the category of the product. And in Tableau, a true date is a month, a day, a year. And it doesn't have to be in that order, but all those pieces have to be together. So if you just have a year, it doesn't really think of that as a date. It just thinks of it as a number, a whole number. So we'll look at that more. Let's go ahead and look here. So Tableau will want to sum up any sales or any totals or any list of numbers. It will want to make a total. And so what you do is you say to Tableau to do something with this column, and it says, okay, I'll give you the sum, or I'll aggregate it. So it will constantly try to be doing that for you. And you'll see that, and it will show you how it does it. In the software, it'll give you the clue of what it's doing. But just be aware of that. So then to get it to go a little bit more detail into this data, you will have to tell it which variables to use to split the numbers up across. First, you pick a variable, for example, maybe a product category here. You can still have Tableau aggregate the sum of the sales and the product category. And you can split it up by multiple items and by date. So now we can see that it is set up years, even though we had, over here we have the years, even though we had the month and the day, we've now just looking at the years for this data. Tableau will try and pick what part of the date would be most useful for your data, the whole date down to the day, or would it be useful to look at a whole year? And then even treat it like a dimension, that's what it's doing here. And then you can see we take this kind of information and we'll turn it into a visualization, where you can go through the process of dividing and summing your data and picking a way to represent the data. And you can pick a chart or a color or a shape of how you want it, maybe a bar chart or a line chart, or however you're going to represent the data in the best way possible. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and open Tableau Public. I'm going to jump in here, and you may have yours open already. I'm going to sign in real quick. Oh, maybe I'm already signed in. Yep. So you didn't see me sign in. I'm sorry about that. But let's just kind of talk about this page. You usually see busies of the day. So if you want to look around and explore or anything that's trending, or if you want to, you can just get into my profile under your little icon. And that's where we're going to kind of start. I hope everybody is able to get here. And if you're not here and you need a minute, let me know. Just go ahead and drop something in the chat or kind of raise your hand and we'll hang out a second. You can see these are things that I've done in past workshops, and then we're going to create some today. Okay, I don't hear anybody kind of needing more time, so I'm going to go ahead and click on Create a Viz. And the first thing it's going to ask us to do is connect our data. So I'm going to go ahead and use the emissions data that we have on our worksheet. Remember, that's sitting here. I've already downloaded it and have it ready to go. So I'm just going to drag that up into this area, but you can upload it from your computer if you don't have it available to drag. And then it's going to look at that information and see what it can read. So it's brought in that data, and you can see we have these different files here. So we have the state CO2, that's, carbon dioxide, monoxide. And then it's from 1990 to 2018. And then we have state CO2 pivot and then state props. So just to begin for ourselves today, we're going to just go ahead and pull this over here. Now let's make sure we check that the data came in as we expected. Did it read the first line as headers? It did, so we can see that. I'm going to go ahead and click this update now. Let me kind of talk about that for a second. I'm going to choose update now so you can see it as it's happening. But normally when I'm just working on this and not really teaching it to somebody, I would just use the update automatically, and then it would automatically kind of refresh the data for me. But I want you to see that it pulls it in and it sets it up, and then you can see the rest of the sheet. So we can see that these are the column heads, the headers for this column. And if we didn't have that, we could fix that now. And we'll see an example later. But let's kind of talk about what it is here. I'm going to pull this up so we can see a little bit more. We can see the information over here. We're looking at this sheet. We're looking at, these are the field names, these are the types, and here's the columns with that same information. So the first one is CO2 state. If you see there's a little world here, I can click on that, and you can see that it is treating that as a string, but it's a geographical role. So it's identified that it is a state in provenance. And so anytime it's checkmarked there, that's how Tableau is reading that data. And so with this information identified as state provinces, it will actually have some boundaries that it can relate to as a geographical role. Now let's go ahead and look at the next one. And we have CO2 sector. Now this is just a category in this data set, if you will. While states might be in a lot of data sets, this will really just be something we use here. And then it's just looking at it as a string, and that's why there's an ABC there, and it is listed here as a string. Now the next one is the CO2 year, and you can see here's the years listed. I'm going to click on it, and it is looking at that as a whole number. So that is a good thing. If we ever have a year that is not being used as a whole number, we need to make sure we mark it that way. And you can just twist that back and forth. And so then it would be there. And then the last one is emissions. And let's look at this. And it is a decimal, in which that's the type of number it is. It is reading it as a decimal. So all of that data came in the way we thought it was going to. Okay, and so here, let's just recap here in the year. Sometimes people will think they want to change it to a date or and time. But remember, as I was saying in the PowerPoint, a date in Tableau has to have the month, the date, and the year. And we only have the year here. So we can't change that to a year or to a date. It has to stay as a number. So, and that's why it's a whole number. Okay. So look how much Tableau guessed at our data and got it right. Tableau might have trouble if a number in a column, if there's some missing data. So you always want to pull in data that is pretty clean. And we'll talk about cleaning up data in just a minute. But if you ever have maybe a question mark or a tilde, which is that little squiggle, or maybe an NA or a null, sometimes you'll see null even, you need to clean that data up, because the best way for data to come into Tableau, it needs to have all of the columns and the cells filled in. So we need to be careful about that. Okay, so we've got this pulled in. I'm just going to go ahead and click on sheet 1. And it's going to do this extraction. And it will take just a little bit. Like, it usually takes less than 30 seconds for this to happen. But it's just kind of pulling all that data together. And then I'm going to go ahead and click up here on this screen, the Publish As. So we can name this workbook. And I'm going to go ahead and name this workbook Emissions. If I can type and talk at the same time. Oh, I missed my second I there. There we go. So then let's talk about that. I've named it something. I do want to check this. I like to show this sheet as tabs, and that will come more relevant of what that means when we get to the end of this workbook. But if you don't like that look, I'll point it out again, and you can always have this unchecked. Now, I usually don't put anything here with a password, because remember, I'm only loading things to this public page. You know, it's open to the public on the website. That is not confidential, not information that I don't want the world to be able to see. You could try this password, but I would just be concerned. I don't know their security. And so if I knew that data needed to be saved, I would want to save it on my own computer, not on the web. And then I'm going to click publish. And then it will take just a minute for it to do it here as well. But then as we go ahead and save throughout or publish more, you usually only do the save as, and then you publish as you build things. It will build a lot faster when we publish in a few more minutes. Okay, so we have this sheet. Let's kind of talk about the screen. We really haven't looked at this too much. We have our information pulled in here. We have our dimensions and measures listed here. Excuse me. And if we wanted to get back to our data source, we could click right here and we would be back on the screen before, so that we could look at our data, pull in more data, whatever we wanted to do. But we have highlighted this sheet. Here's the sheet here. I'm going to go ahead and rename this sheet. I like to rename them pretty much at the beginning if I know what I'm going to do with that. So let's look at a bar chart, and I'm just going to name it that and say OK. Then that way we already have the label ready to go when we've published it. And so you won't just have sheet 1, sheet 2, sheet 3. And then you can always add another sheet just by clicking this next icon. And then the middle icon here is the dashboard. So remember, that's where we're going to put a lot of the sheets and create an interactive dashboard. And then this last one is stories. Now, stories, you can kind of build like PowerPoint in here if you want, or kind of it will end up looking like a website if you use that tool. But we're not really going to talk about stories today. We're just really going to focus on some basics, looking at sheets, building a dashboard, pulling in data, and kind of manipulating that data today. Okay. So the other thing that we want to talk about is, while we pulled in this information, anything that is italicized, it kind of pulled it in itself. So the latitude and the longitude are generated because it knew that there was state data in here. And state data has boundaries, like countries have boundaries, counties have boundaries. But some other things that you would think would have boundaries, maybe like a city, usually does not have boundaries embedded into the data, because cities can grow and change, but states are not going to change anymore. Counties usually do not change. So that is a boundary that can be pulled in and created with the longitude and the latitude and longitude. Sorry. Okay, so let's go ahead and give a simple bar graph a try. Let's go ahead and drag the CO2 state to the column. Sorry, just a second. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to do CO2 state to the columns. And so it's going to try to read that data, and it did. It put each state listed in a different column. And if I move that down to the rows, it would have the state all in one column. And so you can just see how it's looking at that information. But I'm going to go ahead and move that back to the column so we can have it across the chart. And then let's go ahead and move the CO2 emissions to our rows. And notice when we did that, it automatically summed the CO2 emissions. So we didn't really tell it to sum it, but remember, Tableau is always trying to think about what it can do. And so it told us, oh, we're going to sum that real quick for you, and then we're going to put it in the total in your chart. And so is going to want to do that. And then it does tell you that it's doing the summing. And you can kind of look in here. I'm going to right click in here, and then it will say that it is a measure. So that's why the check mark is there, and then it's doing the sum. So you can see that here, or also the sum is right there at the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm coughing so much. I apologize about that. Okay. So now, this is not the easiest chart to read. So let's go ahead and look at that. We're going to use the sort button. We can use these sorts. And we can use them. This is the ascending, of course. Here's the descending. But you can also do that by clicking on the attribute, and let's just go ahead and do this with the button. Sorry. So we got this here, and we can see that it's descending, of course, and all of the information is the front. The highest numbers in the emissions is at the front. We can see that, it looks like Texas and California are the biggest states that have the most emissions, but it's not very easy to read. So I'm going to go ahead and click the swap button. And so, hold on just a second. My file kind of just stopped working in my Word, and I wanted to make sure that I had the right one. So let me see something. Give me just a second. I think we'll be much smoother if we look at that real quick. I'm sorry about that. Okay, there we are. That's better. I'm sorry about that for a second. Okay, let me get our stuff back up so y'all can see that as well. So we can now decide if we want the chart to be really wide or really tall. And then that way we can use the swap button. And this will take whatever it is in the rows and put it in the columns, or vice versa when we use the swap. So Tableau knows some of the most common things you want to do and suggests some of these. And that's why we have these little buttons here. And that's even a sum button, totals button. But what if we wanted to include the sector? Does anybody have an idea of what we might do with the sector?
I have one quick question.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, if I want to sort the state name alphabetically, how would I do that?
Yeah, we're gonna do that in just a little bit.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Okay. And actually, it usually brings it in, but because we had summed the emissions, it usually does it in alphabetical order. But that's when we did the ascending. Let me show you back that. Let's go back just a bit real quick. And so you see it is alphabetical here. But when we did the descending or the ascending, it would not be alphabetical anymore. Did you get that?
Yes,
So,
thank you.
okay. So I'm going to just swap it around so you can see right now they're all alphabetical. But then I'm going to go ahead and use the descending to get us, and then that way. Because most of the time when you're looking at something, I mean, occasionally you might need it alphabetized, but most of the time you want it to be, you know, whatever you're focusing on, the most or the least, whatever is in your data that is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sure. I'm glad that you asked the question. Thank you so much. Okay, so let's again talk about sector. What are we going to do? Well, we're going to just drag that sector to the column. And you can see now it is put all the sectors in here. And it is showing you that amount for each state across the way. And there's nothing wrong with this. It has 5 charts. It's a good way to look at the data. But I think I might really want to back up, and I'm going to use this back button that I kind of just used a minute ago, and have that, because I want to use our sector in the color. So if I drop the sector right here in this area, then it will automatically build the chart in colors. And you can see we can also drag the sector to the sheet area and get the same. Now, if we wanted to combine the 2 ways, let's drag another sector to the columns. And we will have it built out like what we were looking at. So we still have the 5 charts, but now we have each sector is represented by a different color. And we have a key now that has been put out here and built to the right side. So it's very easy to compare the bars and sectors, and the color helps us across the multiple charts. Using the same color allows the reader to see the variables easily. One thing I don't like when we do this is Tableau always puts it in alphabetical order. And so here we are again in alphabetical order. To pick a different sort order, click on sector, CO2 sector, and I'm just going to do choose the sort. So I'm going to do right click, and here under sort, I'm going to do descending again. So we'll always have the information over here. And again, we could have used our buttons as well, but that way. So Tableau has several ways to do multiple actions, as a lot of times multiple softwares do that, like Word lets you do things multiple ways, or Outlook does. And so I'm going to try to point out as many of them as possible so you can learn them as well. But now we can see that we have transportation is the one that is sitting up here at the front, and it's in descending order. And it may not look like it's descending here, but if you looked across, it should be pretty much descending. And then While we have made this data look better, it's still a lot to look through when you look through all the 50 states. So it's a little overwhelming, and we can, Tableau makes it an easy way to do this, is to display, is to filter it to, which is a removing process, and we use these filters. So let's drag the states to the filters. So I'm going to drag that to the filter. And then we can see here is the pop-up window, if you will. And if I kind of close this, then you can see this a little bit clearer, I think. You can have different kinds of filters. You can have a general, a wildcard, a conditional, or the top and bottom. And so it opens it kind of on the general. But what we want to use is the top and bottom. So I think we will want to do this by field. And then let's go ahead and do it by the top 15. I'm just going to put in 15 here. And then for whatever reason, you have to kind of scroll down to see the OK. I wish they would make that box just a little bit shorter. And so I'm going to say OK. And then now you can see that we have this sitting here with just the 15 top states. So we can see that we have Texas, California, Pennsylvania, as you will. So this is a standard bar charts, and where it makes sense to use rows and columns, and how to manipulate them in Tableau. But what if we wanted to look at a chart where you don't always have rows and columns at all? Does it really make sense to think of it as rows and columns here? So I'm going to go ahead and get a new sheet. We'll just kind of leave this one sitting here and look at some few other features. I'm going to rename this sheet by clicking on the sheet and or right-clicking on the sheet and click rename. I'm going to do tree map. So we had talked about this earlier. And so what we're going to look at here is the sectors in the emissions, sorry. And we're going to drag sector to text. Now, you don't always really use text unless you're labeling things, and you see we just get kind of the labels of that. But let's go ahead now and drag CO2 emissions to size. And you can see now we have a tree map. So again, these tree maps are kind of used in infographics a lot, or in business or finance. And it's useful if you have multiple subcategories, because then you would just get a smaller and smaller rectangle. Tableau kind of picks the tree map for us, and it's a fine visualization, but I really wanted to look at circles. So over here, instead of the automatic, which that's what we've been using, I'm going to click on a drop down, and I'm going to click circle, and then we're going to have the circles here. I can tell Tableau I want a different chart by using the drop down menu and use the circles. Okay, so we got rid of the rectangles for circles, but it gave me something called a packed bubble chart. And now I'm going to change it back to text in the drop down. So now we have a word cloud. And so you can see the word cloud is here. Now, if I was going to build a word cloud, and that's all I was going to do in Tableau, I wouldn't really use Tableau for that. There are a lot of other tools out there that'll help you build something this simple. But if I was going to do this with some other charts, then I might do that as well. And one thing is I really like the color. So let's drag another sector to color. And then you can see the worlds would change to their column and color that we had identified earlier. Now let's go ahead and rename this sheet to word cloud and say OK. And then let's go ahead and look at something else. I'm going to click on it. A new sheet. I'm going to get a new sheet. So we have,
Excuse me. Can you please little bit show? I just made amazed how you got the just the text, not the circle.
just the text. Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
If
Sorry,
I'm
I
going
just.
too fast, y'all tell me. I'll slow down or I'll try to.
No, I just like got my internet got slow, so I
Oh
just.
gosh, yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
We were having
No
a
problem.
problem with that earlier.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, just let me know and we will do that. Okay,
Yeah,
so
thank you.
yeah, sure. I'm just going to kind of back up a few. So I'm going to use my back button just a bit. So just until we get back out of here. So we have the circles. I think you were there with me. And then I'm just going to drag let me see. Sorry, I got myself backed up a bit. Let me get back out there. I want to change it back to text. So instead of now it's picking circle, I chose it to pick circle. I'm going to choose it to do text. And then we got the words. And then we got the color on the words by doing the sector to the color. And that's how we got the word cloud. If you need anything else, you let me know. I'm going to quickly rename this again, because when I backed up, it changed it back. Okay, so now I'm just going to grab that new sheet again. Thanks for asking so many questions. I really like it. So if anybody else has a question, feel free to jump in. Okay, so now we have been able to get some charts and see what Tableau can do, but have we been getting what we think we should be getting from this data? So let's talk a bit about the bar sheet again. So as we're looking at this information, can we see something that is interesting here at the top? Some of these states are our most populous ones. So what if I wanted to really normalize for population? Would that change this chart? Let's kind of see. So I'm going to go back to my sheet 3. And we will want to do a per capita calculations here. Tableau makes it really easy for you to pull in data from a secondary source. Sorry. And I'm going to get back on my data source. So that's the first square or rectangle down here. And now I'm going to go ahead and pull in the state pop. And I'm just going to pull it in over here out to the side. I'm not dropping it on top of something because you can see that's a union. And then I'm going to put it over here. And so before we kind of address this error that we've got going on, let's kind of talk about what it's looking at. We have this first set of data and we have a second set of data. And then this line tells you what kind of, information we'll be looking at both those. It's really called a relationship instead of a joins. So you can join, and that's a function. But today we're just really going to be talking about relationships. And if you wanted to learn more about that, you can do that. But if you were to join the data, then you would see all the columns together in the preview. Whereas today we'll just see one and the other. But let's address our error here. And we see that we have the warning sign and we need to kind of address that. So what we're really looking at is here at this part, we want to kind of make sure that these are set up so that they understand what is happening with each other. So I'm going to select from the CO2 1990 2018. I'm going to select the let's see, the population. No, I'm sorry, the year. Sorry, let's do the year. And then I would do the same over here. So now I'm telling it to read it, the year and year together. And let's do one more. I'm going to add another field by clicking on that. And now I can select the CO2 states and the population states. And then now, if I'm going to show you the update now, you can see. So we're really looking at the state pops in this area. We can go back and look at the CO2 sheet information here. And we can always look at the relationship by clicking here. And you can see that it has removed the warning symbol so that we have that information available. So right now we're looking at this information. We can see this relationship, or I can look at this information by clicking on it and seeing that information here. So again, this is a relationship. And if it was adjoined, you would see all of these columns listed out to the side here. So that's just a little bit different. You're actually moving data around, and here you're just kind of helping it read it to the relationship that you've established. Does everybody kind of get that? I mean, I know it's a little complicated, but that's important to kind of get. Okay, let's go ahead and get back into our sheet 3. It's going to do a quick extraction because we just put in the state pops. Okay, it was making me panic there for a second, but it's okay. So here we are in the sheet 3 now. Let's go ahead and publish. So it will quickly maneuver that. So now it's publishing everything that we just did, or it just did publish it. So if I was to look at that file, it would have the bar chart and the word cloud already embedded in it. Now let's kind of look at our information. So I'm going to kind of expand these so we can look at those a little bit better. And we can see that the data has pulled in here in the tables. And we have the dimensions and the measures for each of these 2 separate tables. So here's the first sheet we were looking at, if you will, and here's the second, and then here's the information, and here's its information. And then again, you can see it's built in the latitude and the longitude because we still have state information. We still have data that has a boundary, and that's why it needs to do that. Okay, remember we were kind of doing a per capita calculation. So for us to do that, we have to calculate how the population affects the emissions. So we need to do a calculated field. You can do this several different ways, but I'm going to go to the CO2 emissions, and I'm going to right click here. And then I'm going to click on create, and then I'm going to do the calculated field. And then I'm going to name this calculation something. So I'm just going to go ahead and name it something that I would recognize again. I'm going to do normalized. Sorry, can't spell and type and talk. Emissions. And then it already has what we're going to use the first one. So then I'm just going to put in the divide, and then I'm going to start to type in the pop. And you can see we're going to do population estimate. And then before that, you could see that it was invalid, and it was telling me there was not enough information here because the formula was not complete. But now that I have the formula complete, it tells you the calculation is valid. So I'm going to say okay. And then let's see what we have added over here. So now we've created this variable, if you will, and you can see out to the front here, if you can see, it's a little equals. And that little equals in front of this hashtag here is indicating that it is a calculated field. Okay. So shall we try to create a bar chart within normalized emissions? Do you remember how to do that? Can y'all figure out a way to maybe do that? Okay, so one way we could do that is looking at state and the normalized emissions. So let's go ahead and click on CO2 state, and then use our controller command and click on normalized emissions. And so the control or command allows you to select both. And the command is on a Mac. So if you're on a Mac, that's what you have to do. And now the Show Me tab up here in the top right, if you click on it, oh, it didn't catch my other one. Let me make sure I do that, because it will be the different charts that will allow you to see what is being highlighted. So you can see some we can use and some are kind of grayed out. And that's what I wanted you to see. So if you highlight the data that you want to use, then under the Show Me, it will suggest charts that will be useful from that data, or at least that's what Tableau thinks, right? These are things that they think they can chart, Tableau can chart. And the nice thing is if you hover over any of these, you can see that, you know, let's say for a bar chart, you need a dimension or a measure. Let's see, for tree maps, you might need a dimension and 2 measures. But for a line chart, you need a date, and neither one of these are dates. So this would not work for this. But let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, and so okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and click this, and then I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to double click on normalized emissions, and you can see we have the normalized emissions here. It's totaled all into one column. All of those numbers are decided it needed to be in a bar by default. It didn't know how I wanted to split that up, so we need to split that up. Let's go ahead and drag it over by state. So I'm going to drag the CO2 state up into our columns. Or you can also double click on this and it will create that. And then I'm going to quickly do the swap so we can see that. And then I'm going to do the descending. And now we can see, oh, look, Wyoming is way at the top. Now, we didn't do all this switching around just so we could get Texas out of the lead. But we were really just looking at making sure that population wasn't impacting the data that we were looking at. We can also drag the sector over to color again, and we would have a familiar map that we've looked at before. So let's go ahead and rename this one stacked bar, as that's what this is a stacked bar chart. And then let's try and do a line chart. So that's something we haven't done yet. So I'm just going to grab a new sheet and rename it line as soon as it gets ready. Okay. I'm going to do line chart. So let's use year for the horizontal axis. That is usually how you want a line chart to read from left to right. And it doesn't matter if you use CO2 year or population year. So I'm just going to grab the CO2 year and put it in the columns. And you can see that it's building it across now. So as I stated earlier, this is another example of Tableau being smart with the year, because it's a whole number. It's not giving me a chart. It is giving me a numerical axis, if you will. That's good. So then let's drag So we need to give it a number, and let's use normalized emissions. And we'll put that in the rows again. And so you can see here it is across the way. And now we see the emissions over time. It's doing the sum again, but you can change that if you wanted to by using the drop down. Because you can see the sum here, but we can do the drop down again and get the average or the median if you wanted to do that. But I will keep it at sum here. But if you needed to do that for some other data, you would know how to change that. You would just click in here and do the average, and it would change it a little bit, but not much. And I'm going to put it back on sum. Okay. So there's only one line on this chart. So how can we split up this data? We have the sector or the state. We could choose to use the sector over the state. Because if we had the state, we would have 50 lines. That would be a lot of information. So let's go ahead and grab the sector, and we can drop it on the color. So we would have the 5 sectors here, and it would have the color. So that's pretty good. What if I didn't what if I wanted a different color for each sector, but still wanted it to be split up? I'm sorry, what if I didn't want a different color for each sector, but still wanted to split it up by sector? We could just drag the CO2 to detail, and it would just make them all one. Oop. I think I dragged it out of there, sorry. I misread where I put it. I think I put it back in the column instead of over detail. And so then it would be all blue if for whatever reason you wanted the lines to be the same. But I'm going to go ahead and put this back in color. I like the color. And then if we wanted to add a label, we can also drag the sector to a label. And it will put a label out here to the side for us, if that's what we wanted to do. So then we have this line chart set up for the sectors with the normalized emissions, so we can see that a little bit better. Okay. All right, one last kind of map that we're going to kind of look at today is a map. So we all know we need a new sheet. I'm going to rename that map as soon as it's ready. And then I'm going to go ahead and publish real quick so that it will kind of get caught up again. So now it's publishing these next sheets that we were just doing. Okay. And I don't want to go too fast in case we're having some internet difficulties. So I'll give us a second to all get our new sheet with our map. So for this one, we're going to drag the CO2 state just out here into the drop field here. And then you can see that it's going to kind of use the show me, and it will automatically do something with that information. And since that it is a state, and a state has boundaries, it automatically put the information on a map. And so just so you can orientate yourself around this map a little bit, you have this little tool, and if you hover over here, then if you wanted to move the map around, you just click on that little cursor to let you move the map around. And then now I can drag it, or I can zoom in, zoom out, and let's see if we can get United States almost all together there. Hawaii's so far down. So there we go. So this is really a symbols map, but I kind of, it's okay. It's not great. So you can see that this is a symbols map, but I kind of like the filled in map a little bit more. So I'm going to change it to the filled in map, and I'm just going to use the show me here. Click on it, and it will change it over automatically for me. And in this one, you have to really click on show me again to get that menu to move out of the way. So just be aware of that. I'm going to kind of recenter this a bit. So now let's go ahead and drag normalize emissions over to our color. And what it's doing now is you'll get every state is filled in with a color. And when you have a single value, you get a scale instead of multiple colors. So since we have a single value that is here, not multiple sectors as we've been using with the color. So remember, we have 5 sectors, but we only have one single value for each state. And so then it gives you the scale. But this still helps us with our data that we're looking at now, because you can see that Wyoming has the most emissions, and then according to the scale, the lighter you get, the less emissions. So you can see what is happening there. North Dakota, South Dakota, Louisiana, I guess, Virginia, West Virginia, Texas a little bit. And then we have some lighter ones that is like Idaho is a little bit lighter. Alaska is kind of in the middle there. So you can look at that different stuff. Okay, so now that we've created several sheets, let's go ahead and look at how to create a dashboard. So to create a dashboard, instead of clicking on the next icon, remember we want to click on the middle icon, and it'll, if you hover there for a second, it'll say new dashboard. So I'm going to click on that. And then it's kind of reorientating ourselves to this page. Let it have a second, just this minute. Okay, here we are. So let's kind of look at what we have now. We have the sheets listed over here instead of our data, and we can pull those into the middle. And then we have the size. So right now, it's just using this little bit of frame of this because it's set to the desktop browser. But I'm going to go ahead and change this to automatic. And that will allow us to see more of the screen there. And it allows you to view this on the desktop or on a mobile. This website works pretty good on a phone. I have a pretty small phone. I mean, some screens are quite large now for a phone, and I can still maneuver this. But if you had a little bit like a Plus or some of the other ones that are a little bit larger that I can't remember the names of, then you could really maneuver some of this around. But let's go ahead and look at what we want to put over here. We're going to pull the bar chart over, and I'm just going to drop that in the center, and it's going to fill up the whole space. But I could go ahead and pull something else over. I think I'm going to grab the map. I'm going to put it at the bottom here. And then let's maybe go ahead and look at the line chart. I think might be the most interesting. So now you can see where it's going to hover wherever I want to put it. And I think I'll split the bar chart and the line chart together. So we can put that. And then you can start to see that you can move things around if you needed to. So let's say I didn't necessarily need the space for the bar chart. I could grab the bar chart and move it back down here if I wanted to. And then it would allow me to put the map. I could drag the map up across there. It's not letting me get all the way across there. Let's see here. Yeah, let's see if we do that there. There we go. Oh, but now I've squished the bar chart out of the way. Oh, let me not do that. Maybe swap these again. So at least you can see how you can maneuver that around. And I'm going to grab the bar chart and put it back up there. Maybe I'm going to grab that. There we go. I just thought we might put the map on half the space. That might be the best. Okay, so you can see here's the bar chart and the line chart and the map. You can see we have our 2 labels out here. I can grab this if I want to and move it closer to the map if I wanted to. Or if for whatever reason this really needed to go on the other side, I can move it and put it over here. And it would just push this over. a little bit. I could grab that smaller because we don't need all that space for that. But you don't need that much space for the line chart either. I can pull that in. So just do whatever you want to make that the best there. Then we can also, let's go ahead. Oh, I must have clicked on something I didn't mean to. I'm going to unclick that so we have all the data. So just by clicking on something, I can highlight something or not. And let's talk about the filter too. So when I click on the bar chart, you see this? They're on all the charts. And it's a little filter option, but I'm going to use the bar chart as an example. If I click on it, then it's going to let me filter for this. And then it's really going to control the other maps. And so if I'm going to click on Texas, then we're going to see only Texas information in the line chart now and in the map. And I can clear that by undoing that. And I've reset it back to everything. So these are the kind of things that you can let your readers really maneuver on your dashboard if that's something you want to have them do. And that allows them to kind of look at that information so that they could look at, maybe just Florida or just Louisiana, depending on what they're looking for, or just a certain electrical power if you wanted to do that as well. So you can see I put 3 over here, but we have 5 over here, so we could add as many as we want. It just takes up more space. Or you can use 2 over here or 1 over here, whatever you want. And sometimes you may build the bar chart so that you can figure out how you want the line chart to work and then, or look, and then maybe not have the bar chart in the dashboard. So however you want to do that for your data or whatever you want to highlight to your audience, that's what you need to put in the dashboard. So let's go ahead and rename our dashboard. We would rename that dashboard just like we've been doing the worksheets. And I'm just going to go ahead and put emissions as well here. And that's what would be on the public facing side as well. So that I know we have the emissions workbook, but you really won't see that over there. So it's not like you're naming the both of the same thing. And I'm going to go ahead and publish that. And does anybody have any questions on just how to kind of get this information in here, set up a sheet, set up a dashboard? We're going to look at a few other things, but I wanted to kind of make sure we're all on the same page for that. Okay, good. So now that I've published this, then we can go ahead and look what it looks like in the public area. So this is my workbook. I'm going to go ahead and click back over here to close this. So we're back into the public area. And it's going to take it a second, I think, to load here. So it will be building it here, but you can do more details down here. I can click edit, and I've labeled this as emissions, and it's put in the description emissions, but I could type in more here if I wanted to. If there was some Tableau viz that you saw that kind of inspired the data that you were looking at, you could have the link to it as an inspiration here. Or you could also have a link here to link to an external site. If you wanted to have this viz published on another site, you could add that link here. And then anything that we've changed, then you can make save changes. And you can see we've saved that changes. I'm going to go ahead and click refresh and see if it will show up now. So that dashboard is supposed to be here. Let's see if we can see. I'm going to go ahead and get back into my profile, see if it's sitting there. Here it is. It may just be taking it a little bit of time. It's just not populated yet. So I'm going to look at that real quick and see if it will. Yep, there it comes. It just took a minute to get all set up here. So let's kind of talk about this page. You can see that we have the information sitting here. And this is where I was talking about when we saved it. We can see that we are saving the sheets out here. So I can look at each of those as a user or a reader of this information. Or I can just look at the dashboard. If you don't want those sheets here, you can always change that under the settings. And immediately for this, you could show the sheets or not show the sheets. If I not show the sheets, then we'll just have the dashboard available. I don't mind the sheets showing, so I'm going to leave those open. But this is also where you're allowed to let others download a copy of this or not. And so I typically keep that turned off. But if for whatever reason you wanted to turn that on, you could do that. And then this one, you could show this on your profile or not. If you're in your account, you can see it, but if you're just on the open web, you wouldn't be able to see it. But I don't really understand what would be a benefit of that, I guess, because it's still on the open web. It's not visible on your profile. So that's the difference there. So now I'm going to go back to my profile here, and you can see those are here. I think if we refresh that, the map would come through here. Yeah. And we'll have that sitting there. Okay, so then we have been talking a little bit at the beginning of how to clean data. So let's just quickly look back at my PowerPoint. I wanted to show you some information about that. Let me get that open again for us all to see. Sorry, it kind of went back to the beginning. Let me scoot down here. Okay, so really in data preparation, basic data formatting, you really need to remove any empty rows or non-data rows, or make sure each row is complete. So remember, if you had a question mark in there, or the tilde, or an NA, or a null, you want to clean up that data. And you may not be able to get that data, but you might have to really look at the data and see if there is enough information to make it work for what you were going to look at. And then if there's any totals and subtotals, you want to make sure you remove that. And you really need to have a block of data, which works best for Tableau. And then we're going to talk about Tableau Pivot in just a second. So this is how I found this emission data from the government. A lot of times when you get information from the government, it's not really set up to go into your software the way you need it. And so then I kind of put it in this format for us to use in our file. And I think it's pivotal for you to see that. So while I don't have you follow me here, I do think it is good for you to kind of see me work that real quick. I'm going to pull this over. I'm sorry. Let me open it and then pull it over. And then you should see this. So this is, what? Where did it go? Sorry. I hit the wrong button. I meant to make it bigger. Okay. So this is what the data looked like when I pulled it off of the website from the government. One thing I do want to point out is a lot of times data will have, for whatever reason, just kind of like notes down here. And so you want to clean that up for sure. And then to kind of address what we were talking about, blanks and the subtotals, then we're going to do some calculation here. Now, we're really not learning how to use Excel, but I just want you to see you need to clean up the data before you can get it into Tableau. So I'm going to click on A, and then I'm going to go to special and take the blanks out. And I'm going to type in here E2, and then I'm going to do control. So now we've put the state all the way down. I'm going to copy this real quick. And then I'm going to do Control Alt V so I can get this open. We're going to have the values. We're going to say okay. And then we're going to click the whole sheet. And we're going to sort by a custom sort by sector. And then you can see we still have the information ready. But then when we got down to all the subtotals down here, which are bolded, we could just delete this information, and the data above would be what we would port in and upload into Tableau. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this, and no, I don't need to say that. Okay. Oh, and then let's go ahead and get in back into our, I'm going to close my PowerPoint real quick, and I'm back on the Tableau page. So let's go ahead and look at the other data we were going to use. So I kind of taught you how to do some things, and then I thought we might use the Netflix data as some fun, and we can kind of build that together, if y'all will. I'm going to create a new viz. And the first thing it's going to do is ask me what data we're going to look at. Oh, before we do that, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you how to use that data in CO2 pivot so that you can learn how to pivot. Let's do that next. I'm sorry. We need to go ahead and pull the emissions data back in. And then we want to use this sheet, and you can follow me on this. I did set up this sheet so you could do it. I'm going to click over here. And so this is the data where I got it set up for the information we were just working on, the data set. So when we pulled it in, did it read the headers? No, it didn't. So we can right click here and say the field names are in the first row, and then it will automatically change that. I'm going to go ahead and click update now so you can see what we have out here. And I don't really need this part, but there's a lot of information here, so I want to kind of have as much of this screen as needed. I can still get back to that information if I needed to, just by clicking on that arrow. But now, right now, we have a lot of information across the way instead of in one good column. So we're going to pivot this. Now, my understanding is I don't know much about Excel pivots, but people find this confusing is what they've told me. If you understand how Excel pivots, it's different here. They say it seems to be backwards. But what we're going to do now is kind of look and see all the years, and we want to kind of click in the white area, if you will, and then I'm going to click shift. I didn't do it well. Hold on. Let me try again. Sorry. We're trying to get all the years, and so sometimes it's easy to do and sometimes it's a little harder to do. Whoop, there we go. Let's see if we got all the years. We did. And I just used that by putting shift and kind of hovering over the years that I wanted to include. And then in that same kind of area, I'm going to right click, and you can see that it has pivot here. And then you can see that it is kind of pivoted that information around. And so as we're looking at these, we can go ahead and open this back up. This is very familiar what we've been looking at this one. We have the state with a globe. We have the string with the sector. We have a string with pivot field names. Well, we don't need pivot field names there. We need to rename that. Let's go ahead and right click on that and click rename, and we can say year there, and it's going to make me update it all the time because I don't choose the automatically, but I just want y'all to see that, so that's why I choose not to do that. And then we want to make sure that it is knowing that the year is a number, right? So instead of a string, because we only have the year, we don't have the month and the day, we're going to choose the whole number, remember, instead of the date. So, and then the same as here, we can just right click on that and get the rename. And I'm just going to put in emissions here, or we could say CO2, whatever you want to label this. So this is how you would kind of manipulate your own data. And then I want to make sure that this number is right. And it is. It's reading it as a decimal. And that's what that is, of course. So that's how I got that sheet set up for us to use when we were looking at this sheet here. You know, it won't pull it over here because I didn't pull it in here. But when we were using that. So that's how you kind of use that information. And then let's go ahead and look at the Netflix. We're getting pretty close to the end. So thanks for hanging in there with me. But I'm just going to not really publish this. I don't need this. So I'm just going to go back out. It may want me to publish it. So let's see if it's going to go pretty fast. It's going to ask me to name it something. I might just even name it test so that I can clean it up really easily. And then go back into my, because we want to, I don't even need that real quick. I'm just going to get a new create a viz so that we can use the Netflix data. And so I thought this would be fun to use the Netflix data. I'm going to, again, it's asking me to connect to the data. Oh, also, we could drag the files in here, but you have some connectors in here. So if anybody wanted to connect to their Google Drive, you could do that from here. That's another option that I think is pretty nice. And then I'm just going to grab the Netflix information in there. It's going to upload the file. And then let's go ahead and since we don't know much about this data, let's look around and see what we can learn from our data. I'm going to drag this first one in here. Now, a lot of times when you have that a new set of data that you don't know much about, the first one in the list of the sheets usually has the most information, is what I found. And then others have some information, of course, but a lot of times you will have the most information here to kind of get yourself orientated. So let's look and see at this data. Did it come in right? I'm going to pull that up so we can see some of this. I'm going to update now. So it looks like we have some duration minutes, duration seasons, but look, we also have some null data. So if we really wanted to use this information, we might want to need to clean up this data, it looks like. Then it has the type and the title, and then it has a date added, which we haven't seen yet. And it is a month and day and year. So it's a true date according to Tableau. And then we have the released year because it just has the year in it. It's just a number, but it should be a whole number, which it is. And then we can see we have ratings, descriptions, oh, and the show ID. So, okay, that's what we're looking at there. Let's go ahead and pull in the next one. I'm going to get the cast and pull up over here. Again, not on top, just next to it. And okay, so now that show ID is going to be the running one, it looks like, for all these here. So we're going to have the cast and the show ID. So that's how it's going to know the relationship, that it married the show ID from the titles to the cast, the titles cast. Both have show ID. So like when we had the problem in the state population, we had to marry that to the state emissions and the year in that. And that's why we don't have a error message here, a warning sign. It kind of knew what to do. So that was good. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and pull this down a little bit so that we can go ahead and pull in some of these others. And I'm just going to drop one right after the other. I am going to look at the data, make sure it looks like what we should be. We have the ID, that's what's being married. Okay. So look at this. This is interesting. This is a string, but it's called listed in. So do we really know what listed in is? Since it's labeled as category, I don't know why they didn't label this one as category. There's nothing else here that is category. But we could also rename this to genre, which is like the type of category, I guess. So I'm going to use genre, or you can use category. But I think the listed in was kind of a misnomer, and it would be harder to read that once we started to manipulate our data. Okay, I'm going to just pull this down and pull in the countries. And are we getting this information? Yes, it's a world. It is a country. Countries have boundaries. And so we'll be able to see that. We have the ID. We don't have an error. Let's look at the last one. Update now. It is a directory, so it is a string. Here's the show ID again. That's getting all the relationships are listed here, so we can see all those. Now we could go ahead and get into our sheet. So it's going to do the extraction, and we pulled all the data in together. And it usually just takes, like I said, less than 30 seconds. So let's see if that works here. Yep. And then I'm going to go ahead and click Publish As and name it. I'm just going to name it Netflix data. And I'm going to go ahead and show the sheets, and you know what that means now. I'm going to click Publish, and it'll just take a second for that to get ready. Maybe a second longer. There we go. Okay, now let's kind of orientate ourselves to all this information. There's a lot of stuff here, isn't there? So again, we're in our sheet. We're getting ready to pull some information over here. We have all these tables listed here. So let's kind of look at that information. We have all of our dimensions and measures again for each table. And you can see the table names are listed here with the little icon. You can have these kind of scrunched up, but I kind of like to work with them all kind of spread out. And then you can just kind of maneuver up and down. So we have all of those listed for each table, the measures and the dimensions. And then we each even have our longitude, latitude and longitude. I get those backwards all the time. Listed here because why? Because we have a country and that's a boundary. So it could generate that information again for us. So does anybody have any idea of what we want to maybe look at? Okay, let's try to do a simple bar chart again. I'm going to rename this. I'm going to do bar. I'm going to say okay. And then I think I'm going to look at the genre. So let's go ahead and move that to columns. And so we have each of the genres listed here. And then let's do the title counts and put that in the rows. Okay, so you can see that it is doing the count of the titles there. And we've got it across the bottom again. So I'm going to swap that real quick. We still left it alphabetical, but we could do descending. And there, here's our null data showing up. So let's do ascending because we haven't done ascending yet. And we'll see the least amount first. And that null is there. Remember, we could clean up our data and get that out. Let's see what we have here. Some interesting. It looks like we have more TV shows down here. So then when we do descending, we have the movies at the top, it looks like. Yeah. So So the most population in Netflix at the moment is international movies. And then documentaries is coming in. What is that, fifth? Yeah. So that's what I watch a lot of documentaries on Netflix for sure, and thrillers. That's what I watch mostly. Okay, so that was a pretty simple bar chart. I'm going to go ahead and leave that there. Maybe we can do a line chart now. Anybody interested in guessing at what we could look at in the line chart? While we're waiting on our sheet to load up, I'm going to rename it line. Y'all have suddenly gotten very quiet. Well, since we haven't had a date added column, let's do that. So I'm going to put the date in the columns. And so you can see that we've had the year here, and it's going to move from left to right. That's what we usually do. Of course, we could clean out that null. And then let's go ahead and do Netflix titles to the rows. We can see the count. And so we can see this line chart here. So you can see as Netflix got bigger, 14, 15, 16, it started to take off here. We're getting to a peak at the top here. And then you can see that in 20, this data, I think I got it downloaded in 19 or 20. So I bet you it's just that it doesn't have all the data for 20. And that's why it has a steep drop off here. So let's see if we can kind of add that information to the chart. I'm going to right click on our date added, and we have the year listed here. We can see that we have the month or the quarter or the day. But if we look just down below, we have a second year, and look at this month has the month and the year. And since our date has the month and even the day and the year, we can use this option. So I'm going to check this. And now we can really see what is happening. What are some peak months of when it was really getting a lot added. And then we can also check here that we just had a little information in January. And that's why we don't have very much information for 2022. Sorry, 2020, not 2022. So, okay. Let's see if there's anything we want to look at there again before we kind of wrap up. Okay. Let's, oh yeah, we hadn't used the map yet. Let's go ahead and create a map real quick, I think, before we publish this dashboard. We'll have to create a dashboard real quick. But I think it'll be interesting to look at the map. So I'm going to rename this map. And then what are we going to do with this information? Let's try the double click and see what happens. So it automatically put it over there in our symbols map. I'm going to do the filtered map because you know I like that one a little bit more. And then I'm going to click the show me again so that it will close up. But now they're all the same, it seems like. So we need to use the count of titles to color so we can get the color scale again. So we need and then let's kind of move the map so we get one view. Let's put Alaska back over here. And then I think we can see most of the world in kind of one kind of setting. So there's a lot from the US, of course, but it looks like there's a lot from India, and maybe even British looks a little bit darker there. And maybe some interesting stuff down here. No, I think that's just extra squiggles for the little outlines. Sorry. But then you can see who is putting the most information into Netflix, and get that information there. Okay, let's go ahead and quickly do a dashboard. So I'm just going to grab that and rename that to Netflix as soon as it lets me. And then I'll publish it. Oops. And go ahead and publish it real quick so that it will get caught up to us. And look what it did again. It put us back on this desktop browser. I'm going to put it back to automatic so we have the whole screen to look at. And then let's just pull some things over here. Let's pull the map over first. And then maybe I'll put the bar down here. And then maybe I'll split the bar in the line. That's pretty good. And maybe we'll give the map a little bit more space just by pulling that around again. And maybe we even can pull the line in a bit. So we still have our scale very close to the map, so we don't need to really mess with that. And we can see all this information. Now I'm going to go ahead and publish that, and then I'm going to get back over to the other space so we can see it in the public area. So it usually loads up with the Netflix, and you can add the details if you want. And I think it's moving just a little bit slow because usually that is visible here automatically. I'm not going to change any details, so I'm going to leave that there. And I'm just going to get back into my profile. I think that will let it refresh for us real quick. There's that test one. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one because I don't even need that. That was the pivot that we just did real quick. So I'm just going to click on these three dots, click delete this viz. And then we have the emissions one and the Netflix data one. And if we click on this, I'm sure it would build the information here. And again, you can do the settings here with this little gear and turn the sheets on or off if you wanted to do that. I really kind of like the sheets. You can see where that information was building from if you wanted to. Now, these are not really related, right? Like the emissions one. So even if I did the filter here, it won't have that option because if I just look for that, I don't think it will. It won't change the line, at least. It could change the map. So, okay, that is all the things that I was going to talk about today. We're coming in a little early. That's nice. Does anybody have any questions that we want to discuss before we sign off? Oh, and if you can, so nicely, Jean put the link into the student feedback information. But I'm still kind of doing this. This is only like my my second or third time to do this. So if you can give me any feedback on my pace or if there's something you thought was good or bad, I would love to hear that in the evaluation. You can find that on the LibGuide, or again, Jean put the link in here in the chat. And I see that there's a question there. Are we going to send out the recording? We will. It does take us a little time to get the transcript done, but I should be able to send that out. Well, it's Thursday, so maybe early next week or maybe at the very latest at the end of next week. Yeah. So maybe Monday or Tuesday, but more likely next weekend, Thursday or Friday, it will probably be ready. And then I will send it to anybody that was registered so you could see that. And I also dropped that here on this page too. So you could see it at a later date if you needed to. You could just come to the guide again and find that information. Okay, well, thank y'all so much. I'm going to stop recording.